Good morning, everyone. Thank you for your patience. I thank you all for joining us and we welcome you to this webinar session. My presenter today, Nilesh Shrivastava, will talk about achieving analytics-driven asset performance management. Nilesh is the Managing Director of Asset Analytics Inc. He's an industry leader with an eye for analytics in asset performance management. Being a seasoned subject matter expert for over 25 years, he is now helping clients with strategic business development by systematically mapping and networking their asset ecosystem to drive business opportunities in the field of asset and production management. That was about Nilesh. Coming quickly to the webinar, a few points to be noted here. During the webinar, we will use quick poll to gain an understanding of few areas related to your asset management practices. Request you to please provide the responses appropriately. You shall be in the listen-only mode. If you have any questions during the webinar, please write those in the chat window and we shall address them at the end of the webinar during the Q&A session. Feel free to type them as we go. If you'd like to have a copy of the webinar presentation, please drop in a line to us at info@assetanalytics.com and we will have it sent over to you. And now over to Nilesh.
Thanks, Anurita, for a quick professional introduction. Good morning, everyone. I hope it's been a good day for you so far, and I wish a very good, pleasant day going forward. So that's a professional introduction what Anurita gave about me. Sorry. So when it comes to, that's on the professional side. On a personal front, I have a life partner and a son who just became adult and is ready to vote for the Indian constituency for the election coming up. And I just wanted to let you know, guys, I enjoy traveling a lot, been to some of the unique places in the world, also done decent amount of off-roading. And as you can see, I track my holidays and, holidays destination pretty differently. And it helps me plan where my next destination has to be. The reason I am showing you this is there are usage of analytics in daily life. We all do formal or informal analytics when it comes to investment planning or planning for tax savings in our daily life. And that's the theme I'm going to talk about today. So today's discussion, the next 30 minutes or so, we'll be talking about the role of analytics in asset performance management, especially in times when corporates and manufacturing facilities are challenged with fierce competition and struggling to maintain cost and increase productivity. Before we begin, I would like to have a poll question posted just to understand who my audience are.
So our first poll question is, which business function does your role fit in? Maintenance, reliability, engineering, projects, or any others? Request you to please vote. Thank you. Moving ahead.
Okay. So we all heard in some context or the other, data is the new oil. What I would like to add here is, if data is the new oil, then analytics is going to be the new refinery to provide actionable insight for managers to make plant and asset-based decisions. Now, just to understand a little bit, why do we need analytics? So over last 2 decades, many of the corporates and companies have invested heavily on ERPs, CMMS, and many applications to improve their business function. Over time, these applications have acquired wealth of data, historical information about asset failures, and how they have been managed so far. So leveraging these data set can truly provide a lot of information to manage productivity, profit, cost control, and most importantly, manage the operational risk. This is the reason why we need analytics. And probably you guys have heard, we are, and as every analyst say, we are in the industry 4.0 era which is data driven, data that has been collected during industrial automation and implementation of numerous software for that matter. So last year, what we did, we being in the analytics company, we did an analysis of all the database what customer had, and some of the outcome what we observed was 95% of the data was created in last 5 to 10 years, and by 2020 the way data growth is being seen, 50% of the data will come from intelligent sensors. And with the introduction of new and smaller and intelligent sensors in manufacturing facilities, more and more data will be generated. Okay, let's have a poll at this point of time.
Our next question for you is, how important is the asset data for you in fulfilling your own job responsibilities? How would you rate it, whether it's very high, it's medium, low, or it's not at all important? Request you to please provide your opinions. Thank you. Moving ahead.
Okay, so when it comes to asset management, it is important to understand the data classification so one can relate and understand its significance during analytics. In the context of maintenance and reliability data, we typically see three data sources which are of importance in nature. Equipment data. The first set is equipment data, data which are static, which are pertaining to the design and installation, or the transaction data residing in the applications like ERP, CMMS, or many times in the reliability applications you might have. The second category of the data is the process data, data which are related to the process informations like pressure, temperature, flow, typically residing in DCS or historian. The third category of data set is the dynamic data, data related to equipments and operations, look, listen, feel, vibrations, loop analysis, etc., which changes over period of time across the asset life. Now, if you further classify the data set, you would observe that 50% of the data actually comes from sensor in a form of trend or time series, and only 15% of them are transactional in nature, which typically comes from your work order or notification data. And only, it was pretty surprising even for us that only 2% of data comprises of the asset strategies which goes into your PM plans, the task and the frequencies that is used to build your most efficient maintenance strategy. And overall, we have observed that only 1% of the data, or sometimes even less, it is utilized in making asset or plant related decisions.
At this point, we have another question for you. So, how good or accurate do you think your data set is? It's more than 81%, or whether it's in what range? So, help us understand the range of your data quality, please. Thank you for your answers. We move on.
There's one more point.
And now that we have so much at data, also help us understand how long has your organization or site been using the EAM or the CMMS system? Has it been more than a decade, 5 to 10 years, 3 to 5 years, less than 3 years, or you do not have a EAM or CMMS in place at all? Thank you. Moving on.
So I see from the poll that, almost like 50% of the response we got on the poll, they have been using CMS for more than 10 years, which is great. But we also understand that, having a good data quality and the utilization of data is a big challenge. Let's try and understand what those challenges are. You know, if you look at the basic CMMS are never being utilized at its full potential. Many times users make entries for the sake of closing work orders or notification. Many times proper cataloging of information is not done. Failure records are not coded properly. Many times, we have observed system was implemented in a hurry, and proper taxonomy or asset hierarchy wasn't structured properly as per the business need. And over a period of time, a lot of software got implemented beyond CMMS. You might have, other reliability application or MES application, and they all have their own data set. My experience with the customer is user still maintains, separate Excels for inspection management or commit to pipeline, or even for the matter of, simple reporting, day-to-day reportings are actually managed in the Excels. So whatever be the reason, data sets aren't integrated, data are in silos. The other challenge what we have observed is many times users or the managers and the leaders in the plant or facility, they don't even know what data set is needed and how it can be useful to them. And obviously the fourth challenge, which is related to not knowing the data, comes from the organization culture itself, where we keep questioning ourselves and looking for processes and software instead of truly understanding the need of the data. And it's typical for a human to jump into improvement initiative without detailing our success plan, which can measure performance of the program. Now, while we have those challenges, we have also observed there are corporates who have truly understood the data and applied KPIs and analytics to get maximum benefit. With the good data foundation, analytics can truly deliver all sorts of predictive and prescriptive analytics. So what I would like to do is share two examples with you on how a typical analytics approach can be applied to maintenance and reliability practices. Now, this is one of the example where customer has asked us on the improving of the asset reliability, and they had a general feeling that the root cause for their lost production was equipment being unavailable for the production. What we did was we did a very simple analytics using transactional data from the CMMS, and we used the sensor data from their historian. And you would see that the availability for the equipment, which was compressor in this case, availability was 96%, and the mean downtime was 2.3 days over the analysis period, which was slightly over 29 months. Whereas based on the sensor data, utilization was only 86%, and the mean idle was 3.8 days. And if we did a further analytics to reveal that they had a bad forecasting of demand, and 80% of the time they had 80% of the time they had to slow run the production because of a poor planning. And it was very difficult for the leadership and the management team to understand and comprehend that problem was not with the equipment really, but they had a bad forecasting process of their demand. The lesson here is, analytics on a good data set can reveal things which we couldn't have anticipated. So that was just one of the example of how analytics can be applied to solve some of the business challenge. The other example I want to share with you is from another customer from a pharma segment of ours, which has tasked us to define the maintenance policy using 20 years of historical information they had collected in the ERPs, and before the ERPs they were having history card. So they wanted to use that information and come up with a good maintenance practices and define the maintenance policy. So what we did was a simple viable study. We looked at all the transactional data and did a viable study on all the assets in one of the plant which had 289 assets. And for every first level of asset class, we grouped the assets showing early failures, random failures, and wear out failures. And then for every assets which were of high critical in nature, we did Weibull at the failure mode level and got into failure plots and survival plots. Based on the data we collected after analysis, we came with a certain guideline that later got translated into maintenance policy. So in the first scenario where the beta was less than 1, which is an indication of an early failure pattern, and we all know, early failure patterns are indicative of defect in design, poor restoration skills, or the lack of SMPs and SOPs. And we came up with the guideline with distribution of 80 to 20 when it comes to condition based and time based maintenance. And a further RCA program must be done at the failure mode level. So for these asset class, this became the maintenance guidelines and the policies based upon which the PM task and the frequencies were being determined. For the asset groups which were under the category of random failure pattern, which are attributed due to operating procedures or wrong material design selection at design, the maintenance strategy was to use 60% of the condition based tasks and 20% tasks related to operating procedures, and 20% of them would be on a time based. And for a third scenario where the beta was greater than 1, which is an indication of wear out pattern, it was recommended to use PM optimization because you would have seen, failures which is having a rising trend. You would use PM optimization using cost of restoration as a base function. Sorry. And maybe there was a need to install, some new sensors in place to get early warning and have 80 is to 20 task distribution for conditional and time based. So application of analytics can actually truly provide you valuable insights if applied in a right manner. Data is essential for good analytics, but more important is the analytical approach. The two examples I shared, was a very non-standard way to solve a business problem. It's uniquely different from looking at the KPIs and trends and chart. And as I said, data is essential, but the approach is more meaningful. So analytics consumes data and provide measures and information to solve your business problem. If you look at the root level, 100% of your business problem are caused by either practices or behaviors of the organization. And that's where analytics comes into picture. Use of analytics can truly help address those challenges. And we all know, analytics is not new. It has been around for ages. We have been using analytics. I shared my example of the travel, how I plan my destination for, upcoming holidays. We all use analytics in some way or the other. But the way it has been changed over past few years, bringing data science skills and importance, information that has been captured over here. That's what makes analytics more useful, better way to measure and inform and address the challenges which are caused by practices and behavior.
Now we have a poll question for you. Does your organization has an analytics approach to maintenance and reliability? It either has, it doesn't, or maybe the question does not apply to you. Please give your responses. Thank you. Moving on.
Thanks. So the whole agenda for today's was to talk about how do we sustain an analytics culture in Industry 4.0 era environment that requires a strong approach adopted by every role in the organization, starting from lowest level to the highest level. An approach that can help comprehend the business problem or opportunities, allows for transformation and experimentation, and then evolve as a day-to-day behavior of the employee. So let's look into the 3 steps how an analytics culture can be embedded into a corporate strategy. The first step is setting up the foundation, which requires we engage with the internal client to figure out a business problem to focus on and develop meaningful conversation and consultative research approach to the problem, and then later focus on data that needs to solve the problem and come up with some sort of visual representation of what an improvement or success would look like. This provides a good foundation to start with the analytical program or a strategy. The second step is about the experimentation. Come up with multiple analytical technique to address the problem, build analysis, cross-verify with historical information on success and failure, training people on analytical skill set, provide them with the time and effort to conclude, and put a governance in place so that they don't drift apart. And the third and the most important step is all about operationalizing the program. Driving innovation to think differently as one of the analytical techniques will not solve all business problems. There is no one rule over here. Team has to keep discovering new techniques, encourage data-driven culture. And that's where the commitment from the leadership, from the managers, and the execution at the lower level is required.
With this, I would launch the last poll for the day, please. So, when do you plan to have a data analytics initiative? Is it going on? Is it in a 6-month horizon? Within a year? Have not thought about it, but probably you're interested, or does your organization has no plans? Thank you. And now we move on.
Okay. Okay. So that brings to my last slide probably, and then we'll open up for question and answers. I would like to conclude that if you truly want to drive analytics culture in your organization, don't start with data. Start with the analytical approach for a particular business problem or challenges or pain you're trying to address. Just because many of you have CMMS data for more than 10 years, and you might have worth history recorded in your CMMS, let's the approach cannot be to jump into analytics directly. You need to identify a business problem and then go into the data analytics part. And as I said earlier, data is essential, but more important is the analytical approach. The second is, many organizations think that analytics has another investment in software that they must do. And I absolutely disagree with that. You don't need a software in analytics driven organization. Focus on acquiring the skill sets around data science and people people with the APM experience. Either you can develop those skill sets within the organization or outsource to start with. The third is, once you have identified the analytical approach, then you focus on the data. You may not have those data at the point of time when you have started thinking on the analytical approach, but that gives you a basis to change and set your practices to get those quality information in place. And over a period of time, you will end up in setting up good data practices and process to acquire quality data. And lastly, I would definitely recommend that experiment a lot, because you cannot solve all business problem at one shot. Start small, find low hanging fruits and prove success. So that's the 4 recommendation I would like to give you guys, and that's all I have for the day. I hope you enjoyed listening. I'll hand over back to moderator Anurita for running the Q&A session.
Thank you, Nilesh. I'm sure the audience found it pretty engaging. We are now opening the session for Q&A, and I have unmuted all of you. Those of you who have muted yourself, you can unmute and put out any questions that you may have at this point of time.
They're all on mute. Okay, I see a question which has been posted over here. Is there a question? Okay, let's take the questions which have been posted over here. I see a first question from the team, which talks about what would be a good starting point when analytics has to be implemented. So the way I look at is, why do you need analytics? And my recommendation would be, if you're trying to address analytics, first think of the business problem, what you are going to solve. Unless until you define the problem statement, and then only you will be able to come up with the analytical approach. So the first step in identifying and putting up an analytics culture in the place is to define a set of a business problem which you would like to solve over a period of time. It could be simply to, I want to reduce my unplanned downtime. I want to have my resources utilized across the distributed fleet. So once you are able to define the business problem or the challenges, you will be able to come up with this set of analytical techniques which can be applied. And then the next step would be to look into the inputs which are required, all the variables that needs to go and to be utilized in the analytics. And that's how I would recommend to start with. The other question I see on the question box is, should there be a department, or is it a role of an IT or a business to run analytics? I would say analytics is a role which needs to be a combination of both business and IT. IT would be definitely required, which will provide you with a platform on which the analytics can be done. Sometimes you have those analytical tools or platform available in your IT infrastructure, be it Maximo or SAP. They have certain basic analytics approach or platform or tools embedded into their application. But what is more important is a team and the skills of the team which is required to do the analytics. Because I showed you the two examples, those are a very non-standard way of looking into. The analytics was being, in one example, the analytics revealed that even though you are seeing multiple failures on the asset, but that wasn't the root cause of the problem. On the second example, if you recall, the analytics was being used to drive a maintenance policy rather than addressing a failure or doing a resource optimization or a labor optimization. So the way analytics was approached is very different than compared to the standard reportings and KPIs.
Great. So at this moment, we have no further questions. If any of you has anything, we will wait for 15 seconds before we close the session. Okay. Thank you, Nilesh. Thank you, everyone, for joining the webinar.
Thanks, everyone.
This is a regular series, and you shall be updated on our upcoming webinars. Please join them or write us an email if you're not able to, and we will ensure that a copy of the presentation reaches you. We'll be happy to receive your feedback from this particular webinar and any specific questions also that might pop in a little later. Any service queries are also welcome, and we shall be really glad to assist you with that. Once again, thank you everyone and have a good day.